Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello, this is Kelly Covert, and I am so excited that you press play today. For me to be in your ears is such an honor, and I just want to thank you for inviting me in to share your space with you. I have an amazing interview today on how we can create impact with our voice with Elsie Escobar. You guys are gonna totally dig it, and we go super deep. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to share with you that the doors to the inner circle are open. My private group coaching and mastermind membership group, The Inner Circle, is open for registration. The doors only open every few months, and they will be open from December 4th through the 19th. So if you are interested in joining, if you thought about it last time they were open and you didn't, now's the time. And what a perfect time to do it, right before the new year, where we can really get going on things. The link is kellycovert.com/inner circle. And that's where you can learn all about it and join. But let me just tell you real quick who the inner circle is for. The inner circle is for you if you know you have a big vision and huge potential, and you need to get super crystal clear on what is holding you back. And I'm really super interested in supporting women entrepreneurs who feel stuck in moving your heart-centered business forward. I am super excited to support people with a big vision. So the inner circle is going to help you connect more deeply with your inner voice and uncover those beliefs that keep you stuck, and then reframe them so you can get busy changing the world. And I really believe that you can do that. The Inner Circle is a month-to-month membership that includes 2 group calls per month, weekly emails, monthly webinars, and a totally awesome private community of women who get it. And I am in there on a daily basis, supporting you, encouraging you, connecting with you, and really just being your cheerleader and saying, I know you can do it. So if you are interested, if this sounds like something that you need, go on over to kellycovert.com/inner circle and check it out. The doors are open until December 19th. So moving on to my interview with Elsie. It's so good, you guys. We go so deep on the idea of listening, of what it takes, of the courage that it takes to speak up and to use your voice in a way that creates impact, and how we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to do that. Elsie is a mentor of mine and someone that I've known for several years now, and I have the honor of working with her in the E-League, which is a podcasting group for women that I am a member of. And I hope that you can really feel her energy, feel her intention, because she is just so beautiful and she has so much to say about why we must use our voice. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. Elsie Escobar works in the cross-section of technology, digital media, and holistic living with a heavy bias on podcast production and creative use of audio. As a podcaster since 2006, she was the first female yoga podcaster with an audio show that has now been downloaded more than 5 million times. Currently, she produces 2 podcasts about podcasting, The Feed, the official Libsyn podcast, and She Podcasts, the podcast for women about podcasting and new media from the woman's point of view. She's a diehard podcast junkie who lives and breathes the medium and has the unique perspective of podcast listener, independent podcast producer, and industry analyst and personality. And She might not have updated her bio, but she is also a member of the Podcast Hall of Fame. And I had the great honor and pleasure of seeing her inducted this past summer. And oh my gosh, you guys, I just feel so honored and blessed to have her here, to have this conversation with her and to share it with you. So sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation with Elsie Escobar. Elsie Escobar, welcome to In Her Voice.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. Like, oh my God, it's just, I'll just tell everybody, and I said this in the intro, but you have been such a mentor to me as a podcaster, as a woman, as a leader, as someone who uses my voice. And I am just thrilled to have you here and to share you with my community and my tribe. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I resonate with your work. I mean, it's kind of my work too in a different way. I come at it from a different perspective and whatnot, but it's the same thing essentially. And voice is it's everything, I feel, at least for me.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with that. And I'm going to start with maybe a kind of an unusual question, but I think that it'll be interesting. And that's why I want to start there. And you have been in your life many things. You've been an actor, you've been a yoga teacher, a community builder, a podcaster, an advocate, a mentor. And I think that one of the things that is in common among all of these things is the use of your physical voice. And so I thought we could start there with the idea of why our physical voice is important and then move into the deeper layers of that.
Yeah. One of the things that why I feel the physical voice is so important is because it's also it's part of our embodiment. It's part of us being human. Obviously, there are people who are differently abled that perhaps don't have use of their vocal cords, right? But the element of self-expression, even with language, maybe someone who can't actually use their vocal cords, but is using language with their hands, where you can see in their arms, where you could see expression that way. It is a fundamental way that we humans communicate with each other. And even if we have an internal voice, meaning, let's say, like these are the examples that I sometimes always come to, especially for me, like you have a serious conversation that you need to have with someone. The only way to practice that, the only way to really get good at having challenging conversations is to actually have them. We are not skilled in that anymore. I don't feel there is way too much disembodiment or not a complete use of our entire selves, as in we can write texts to each other now. We can write letters, write emails. And before, that was also the case. I mean, there were letters that were sent out. Like we all know about the Dear John letters, right? From back in the day. Mm-hmm. But there is, I think, another fundamental shift that our culture is moving into right now. There is by far, I feel, a lot of information that is vital and could benefit from a full dimension of humanity that we are missing out on, meaning we will send a very important text versus calling somebody. We will write an email versus going to somebody's office and having a conversation face to face. We will rely on a Facebook post to voice our opinions about things, in a good way and in a bad way. And I feel that we have lost our ability to also recognize triggers with other people because of voice, right? Because when we are speaking it, not only do we get information physically from ourselves, like what does it feel like to say these words? Just that. But also, what does it feel like to have somebody else receive them? Or did they? So there is a level of intelligence that I feel we are missing. And obviously, I'm not teaching everybody to like get together and talk. Like that's not where my sort of my desire, my love, my passion, all of that lies. It really lies in inspiring people to give voice to those things that you have written down, to those conversations that you wish that you could have had, to expressing to somebody who you are. We write those things in social media all the time, our bios.
Right.
And all that kind of stuff. But when was the last time we spoke it out loud? And what's the difference? It's not like good or bad. It's like, what does it feel like for you to say? Like, whatever it is that you made yourself. Like, is it cool for you to say, like, I'm a mom? I'm a mom. Does that feel good or not? Even if it's as simple as something like that. I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter. Like, even if it's those simple things, it has a resonance inside of your body. And we are missing some of that.
Yeah. And I like that you said that we're lacking a level of intelligence. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. But I also wonder if deep down we know that there's fear.
Oh, yeah.
So what are we afraid of?
I think, and I'm speaking from my own personal opinion or experience, not opinion, this is experience. I have a hard time speaking up for myself in every situation. Most especially when it matters, when it is really important. And the reason that I'm so passionate about facilitating you to give voice is because it's essentially because I don't want you to do what I've done. Like in that respect, it's like I don't have the skill set that I wish that I could have had more of that. I wish that I would have been given the opportunity to, at a younger age, speak up. So what are we afraid of? We're afraid of, I'm afraid of not being able to be heard. I'm afraid of crying in the middle of it and losing my power in the sense, or being perceived as emotional. I am afraid of the words that are come out of my mouth, that they're not going to make sense. And that happens to me a lot. In truth, like I'm not making it up. Like I will say something that doesn't make sense because, and I don't know if it could be a family thing, because my grandmother used to be kind of like this as well. For some reason, language is very challenging for me to use words. Like there's a lot of times when I miss vocabulary words, or I can't remember a specific word, and I really I'm fishing for it, and I know what I need to say, but I can't remember the words. And then whatever comes out of my mouth ends up being not exactly what I meant, and silly at times. And usually I'm okay with it because it's not that important and people make fun of me, and it's kind of like an Elsie thing. It's like an Elsieism. Mm-hmm. But when things really matter, I'm afraid I'm not going to have the words.
And that can be paralyzing, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so then I go, well, I don't know if I'm going to say it right. I need to write this down. And then after I write it down, then I'm like, well, why do I even have to say it? Why don't I just give them the note?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So do you think that you could share a story with us of a time where you didn't speak up, where you really needed to be heard, but you didn't speak up, and what the consequences of that were for you?
Yes, I think, I guess at the most subtle, the most subtle level, it started with my family. It was not at that moment, we didn't really have the culture in our home wasn't necessarily about allowing everybody to have a say. There's a very different kind of dynamic. It was like mom and dad, this is what mom and dad do, and this is what the kids do. And so there was nothing else. And there was also never any kind of negotiation. There was none of that. So it was essentially no. It was either yes or no, mostly no. And when I say no, it wasn't like big things. It was, at least, when I was a teenager, it was something like, can I go to the movies? Or can I go to a friend's house? That kind of stuff. And it was no. Or, when do you need to be back after going to, let's say, prom or something? My parents would say, like, you need to be back exactly like 45 minutes after, because that's how long it's going to take you to get home. So, and that's essentially what it was. And there was no negotiation around that. And therefore, I wasn't given the opportunity to be able to talk about it, be able to go, well, Mom, no, listen, Mom.
Right.
Here's this and here's this. I completely understand, Mom, that this and this and this are an issue. I was never given the ability to stand up for myself in the safety of my own home. To be able to have my moms even say to me, or my dad to say, like, we totally hear you. Okay, I understand that point. Can we negotiate here? You can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So what are the consequences? The consequences is that I lied and did it anyway. And I got away with it because I'm a very smart person. and I'm also not like I was never like I'm going to put this in quotes, and you can, I was never a bad girl. I was actually incredibly good, incredibly well behaved. I didn't ever do anything I wasn't supposed to do at all. Like, I never experimented with anything. I didn't cut class. Like, I was such a goody-goody. I'm still such a goody-goody. Like, I don't break rules. I stay in the road, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I broke, in quotes, the rules was in the most smartest ways that I could do. And so here's the skill set that I had. So talking about the prom thing, I was part of student government. So I had access to the template that went out to all families about how long prom was supposed to be and where it was and all that. And I just added an hour to the end of that letter. And I took that home to my parents.
And isn't that interesting that it was using your words that you wrote and not words that you spoke?
I know.
To do that.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So you created this pattern. Well, so how are you healing yourself?
Oh my gosh. I'm doing my best to bring it forward. I think one of the ways that I do it is to speak about it as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
To talk about it as much, to keep myself accountable, to practice. And I'm still not very good at it. It is really, really challenging for me to do it. I happen to have a life partner that is incredibly skilled at it. And I didn't have that privilege before. I've never had that actually, ever as an adult. So having an adult who is exquisite in his conversational skills and his interpersonal skills, and in being able to navigate really challenging conversations in an eloquent and efficient and effective way has been a huge lesson for me. Mm. So he's actually coached me in a lot of the stuff, because I'm still not, especially with really important stuff that is family things and partner things. Mm-hmm. It's still very challenging. And the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And we were talking about this before we got on the call, about our, moving into that habits and intuition and things that feel good for us, and kind of moving in places that a lot of the time, we really appreciate the subtle shifts and all of that. But at the same time, sometimes we must go against that, because sometimes that intuition is wrong. It's just wrong. It hasn't been working until now. The intuition of me not speaking up, the intuition of me sneaking things through because I want to get my way anyway, has served me to some degree, but ultimately it hasn't. And so when he brings this up to me, I'm always like, oh,
Hey there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks. But I feel like inept and angry and defiant and ashamed. All of those things. I feel them all. And they're not comfortable feelings to have.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, I recognize that those feelings are as important as when things feel good to do.
Yeah, I really believe that our negative feelings, if we can get past how they feel, they offer us so much data, so much information. So if we can get curious about those, and go through the feeling of them and then be like, why was I feeling that way? Those questions allow us to learn so much about who we are and who we're becoming and who our soul wants us to be.
Absolutely.
So, you talk about this idea of creating impact with your voice. And I think in today's time, that is so needed. But as you said, how do we balance out what we feel required to speak about and then what is going to completely deplete us? Like, how do we start to discern that? And I know that you're in it right now. And so anything that you can share with us about your process of how you've been learning that discernment, I think would be super helpful.
Yes. And I the number one thing is to expand our capacity to be uncomfortable and to challenge our own habitual behaviors.
Yes.
Our own responses.
Can we just say that again?
Number one thing.
Can you just say that again?
Oh my God. To challenge our habitual behaviors, to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because we are at least now, we are a society of comfort and we have so much given to us. We don't recognize a lot of the simple things, because we have so much, and I'm so thankful about that. It's amazing, and I love it. But it's even in the subtle things, like maybe, we have currently ran out of oil, but we run our heat with oil. Mm-hmm. So we can't, if it starts to get cold, we don't really have the option at this moment to turn on the heater. We have to wait to go buy the oil, right? And we haven't done that. So that's a small discomfort. It's sort of like you sit there and you're like, oh my God, I'm so cold. I wish I could turn on the heater. And then there's a sense of like, oh, I don't know if I can handle being this cold. Oh my God, it's 50 degrees. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's, and I lived in another cabin where we actually had to we didn't have heat for the house. We had to burn, outside. We had to get little sticks and burn them. And if we didn't have the sticks, we weren't warm. We had to wear all these different clothes and all the time wearing clothes in the house. So I actually got used to not having that. And then I realized when I went to the heater, to a place that had internal heat, I was like, oh my God, this is a luxury. This is amazing. But all of that to say that being in a state of being uncomfortable doesn't necessarily, a life is going to suck. You're just going to expand the capacity to be able to function without all of these yummy feelings all the time. That we need some of that.
Yeah, we do.
And to be able to ask really more challenging questions of ourselves. It's sort of like it's a reflection, just like when you were talking about when you have those feelings come up, like those sort of negative feelings, to sit there and go like, now, why did this come up for me? But not like in a way that where you're removing yourself from the conversation. It's just saying like, well, it seems this is bringing out my anger that I haven't really faced in a long time. But, but really continue to look deeper into that and to be able to go like, well, was that necessary for me to say? Was I being was my behavior completely uncalled for? Like, call yourself out. and be okay with being wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's so easy for us to call other people out on that, but to really hold ourselves responsible and in our own integrity for what we're speaking out into the world. And if we're not speaking it, what we're writing, it's more challenging because, we can see everything through our lens if we choose to.
Yep. And I think that is by far, those two things are by far the most important lesson that I've learned. Because, and also, gosh, you do have to attune to something much greater than your lens.
Yeah.
Like you just said. And having even if at first you don't even know where that, even if you don't know what that means, like I just said, attune to something greater than yourself, right? So that's like, that language in itself is like, how do you even do that, right? I'm not an instrument. You know what I mean? But there comes a point where you have to sit there and we have to allow for the transition to go like, can I see something from this point of view? Can I see this from this point of view? What is the input that I'm missing? What's the context that I'm missing from here? And it's going to force you to shift, even if you're doing it from the most genuine and auspicious part of yourself. If you're stepping forth to have impact in the world from that clarity, right? It may still backfire on you. Because again, we're only doing it from one sense of experience. And let me give you an example of that, which was a really huge calling for me. And I thought, oh my gosh, there is so much I don't know. And you've been with me, like you've worked with me, and you're part of the E-League, and you've sort of seen me sort of morph, or not morph, but continue to sort of iterate and expand, like the vision and clarify and all this stuff. And one of the biggest things that I noticed at the beginning is that I really, really want more diversity, and I really want women of color to express themselves more, or to have this level of training. Like I want that inside of this type of work, because I'm such a believer in the resonance that we all have, and like empowering one person can empower everybody else. And essentially, I wanted more people to step into work with me that were more diverse in every part of their podcasting experiences, as well as the type of women they are and socioeconomic status and all this kind of stuff. And so I have this vision, and it's a lovely vision, and it's a very affirming vision. It's a very inclusive vision, right? Mm-hmm. And so I put this out, and yay. And so I'm like, this is positive. This is wonderful. I want to work in this fashion. And one of the first comments that I got was like, when I said we women of color, because I come from a Latin American country, I am 100% El Salvadorian. I was not born in this country. I was born in Central America. And my entire family is Latino. We are indigenous folks, if you will. We have a little bit of Spanish, I'm sure, within our blood. I mean, as most do. Coming from a colonized country, I'm an immigrant to the United States. I have all of this other stuff. English is also not my first language. So I have all of this information. But one of the first things that came up was, who's we, was the response. Who's we? You mean you? And I was like, yeah, me. I mean, in my own head, right? I didn't say, yeah, me like that. But I was like, okay. And so I thought like, wait a minute. Why is she asking if I'm a we? And then I was like, does she not know where I come from? Not in a hoity-toity way, but just simply asking, like, does she not know? She doesn't know my history. She doesn't know where I'm from, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I was like, okay, I will let her know that this is we, because this is my history. And then, she came back and she goes, well, okay, I didn't know that because you present white. And I thought, oh my God, that's a thing.
Yeah.
That's a thing I didn't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I had this privilege. I didn't know. And so I started to do all kinds. And so anyway, of course, mind you, that did not feel good. That was not something that I was like, ooh, here's a lesson. It was a hard hit in my gut because I went at something from a really genuine, again, authentic place. And I didn't see something that was obvious to a lot of people.
Well, and I saw that post and I read all of the comments, and I remember feeling that feeling for you. Also, knowing you and knowing your intention and knowing your history. And it was really interesting to sort of see it from the outside looking in too, like, but what it brings up for me again is that whenever we're using our voice in a way that will make an impact, and that could be in business, it could be in your personal expression of your personal opinion, it could be in supporting someone. There's so many ways that we can make an impact as women with our voices. It requires courage.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk about how you bolster your courage. So you go through something like that, and then your choice is, do I do it again? Because that really hurt that time, and that was scary, and it's going to be scary to put myself out there again. How do you keep doing it?
Well, it again, for me, I found it to be a really, of course, at the moment, it didn't feel so hot or good. I mean, it was like, oh my God, how do I? And the first thing is like, how do I see how would I really go through in terms of the truth of this? And I think like, especially when it comes to race issues and perception and who we are and what we call ourselves, and really diving into a conversation of privilege, you cannot, there has to be listening. You must not talk. You must seriously, whenever these conversations come up, you must listen first and not talk. Even if you have like the greatest comeback, even if you're like, oh, I know how to respond to this. Like, even if you know that, what's the truth of this and how you can see it? And that is when I'm talking about being uncomfortable, because you can't fix this really easy. This is a much richer and deeper conversation that requires your engagement in a deeper way. So what that revealed to me is looking for more facts, because I didn't know what the truth is. I didn't know from a comment like that what the truth was about who I was anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Because then it was sort of like somebody called you out on who you are in your DNA, in your cellular structure. And I was like, oh my God, am I not what I thought I was? Which was a huge identity for me. Obviously, I am. Like, I've never questioned that, because I know where I come from. And so it's like, so it was sort of like shocking. And then I started to do a lot of studying, and I came upon the word colorism. So colorism is exactly what was brought to my attention, that it is in almost every single culture, regardless of where this is in the world. Lighter is good, darker is bad. That's the perception within most cultures, regardless of what it is, whether it's African cultures or Asian cultures or Latin American cultures. It's very prevalent within those by themselves. So there is privilege given to those that are lighter. The lighter, the more privilege. The lighter the colors of the eyes, the lighter the hair. All of that stuff is given more privilege within it. But that doesn't change the fact that I am a woman of color. And so I found a man, his name, well, actually this was in a podcast interview, one of my favorites, which is called In the Thick podcast, is one of my favorite podcasts out there. And there was a gentleman called Eric Ward. He is the executive director of the Western State Center. And so he had this question. He said, is there a temporal privilege that comes from colorism in American society? And he said, yes, there is, but it does not make us white. And so then I had to go deeper, and I had to go like, okay, what is temporal? What does temporal colorism mean? What the hell does that mean? What's temporal privilege? And so, while obviously temporal means like of or relating to time as distinguished from space. And so or relating to a sequence of time or a particular time. So he also brought to attention what was happening in, with anti-Semitism and things like that. And so there is a certain temporal privilege that happens in certain times in our history. And then it smacks us in the face when things come up. Like, let's talk about, Nazis and Jews. So there's, majority of Jewish people, if you look at them, just by looking at them, they present white, right?
Right.
And so there's a certain temporal privilege that comes from seeing that. But then there comes a point when all of a sudden it's not so hot anymore. That's no longer a privilege because it's only in this time frame. Then World War II came, and that's not a privilege anymore.
Yeah.
It's taken away. So it fluctuates and it goes back and forth. And so that, especially, in America, and perhaps even within our own, like at least for myself in terms of Central American countries and my Latino culture and Latino heritage, there is a temporal privilege that comes from us presenting white. So all of this was really eye-opening for me to recognize that first and foremost, because I have the ability to be a chameleon. And that gives me access. And that's what I was like, okay, I'm going to have to, and therefore my voice is that much more important because I have that privilege.
Yeah. What would you say to a woman who says my voice is not important?
Oh my gosh, I would accept it. I would hear her and I would ask, tell me more. Because there might be truth to that. And I think that is a hard conversation to be having. That's where I would like to start.
Yeah. Do you believe that importance comes from within or is reflected upon us?
What do you mean? Can you expand on that?
Someone might think that her voice is not important because that's what everyone has told her. And that's what society has told her. But my belief is that we all have something important to say. We all are bringing something here. And our voice matters. Every single voice matters. So do you think that, what can we do to help people understand that more deeply?
Okay, so there's two different layers to that. One of them is that is a beautiful sentiment, and I think that in a deep way, very truthful. Of course, we as human beings are we all matter. We do in our core, and yet, particularly within our culture as it stands, it's not true. And the way that it's manifested is in the data. It's in the data. It's in the ability to stand in the middle of the room and have a woman of color stand up and say something and not be heard. And then have somebody else say the same thing and they are heard. Same woman, she just happens to be white. And so what does that teach? And as an entire culture, and it's not about, all of these voices matter. No, you know what? This is when you, as a white woman, turn around and go, did you hear what she said? Did you hear her? And that's when the shift starts to happen, because we need to, number one, recognize and say, yes, you're right. You're right. Not that you are not worth it or that you're not being heard, but you're right. People aren't listening. I was not listening to you. I'm sorry. I must do better. And it's in that process, it's in that recognition that it's going to start to shift, because it's sort of like when you're in a situation where you are, and regardless of where it is, if you've got like a certain behavior or problem, like even if you're, I don't know, institutions where, like let's talk jail. Let's talk like somebody went into jail and they were treated a very specific way when they were in jail. And that's one of these like huge problems that we have in the United States, where there is a certain world and behavior that is required when you are incarcerated. And then when you leave, you are not given any other skill set to move forward at all. Like regular stuff, like money and where do you go next and how much something is and how do you go get a bank account, and all of that crap is not addressed. And so there is no other knowledge. And then if you start to look at the system and you go, well, that's not right. What do you mean these guys only get, X amount of money in their pocket and they spend it on the, taxi home from, not even home because they don't have a place to go. And then they can't go to the bank because they don't have an ID, because the ID is not released because of, there's all of this other stuff. And then you get totally incensed. But really, who are you going to go tell? Are you going to go tell the inmate, hey, dude, your voice matters. You can do it. When the law and the process is not set up to help.
Right. I totally hear what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and what's so interesting to me about that, and I think the undercurrent is this, that if our voice can be heard, we must use it. We must use it. And I love going back to what you said, that in order to use our voice, we're required to listen. That's so beautiful, because I think that sometimes we don't recognize that. Like, you need to listen first, and you need to understand, and then you need to speak, and you need to speak your heart. And that's when we will start to change the world and make a difference, and allow, by using our voice, allow other people's voices to be heard as well.
Yep. And that's when I was, in terms of casting light, that's a metaphor I've used for so many years. That comes from my yoga teachings. And then when the eloquence of my main teacher, who's a yoga philosophy teacher. And the concept of that casting light, the ability to really harness our internal fire, and then maybe to also be able to cast that light sometimes to somebody else that knows it better. Yeah. Sometimes to somebody else that can speak it better than we can. Because that's something that I feel is so important for us in terms of our society, is that it's not just about me. It's not. This is what I love to do, and I hope to continue to empower all of you guys to take the seat that you all need to take, and in the fullness that you can take it, and then continue to expand on that, and then continue to expand that conversation. I would have never learned as much as I have in the past couple of months if I wasn't challenged. Right. I cannot grow if I'm not challenged. I also don't know what I don't know. And sometimes it's going to make me feel stupid. It's going to make me feel ashamed. It's going to make me feel like I'm not smart. It's going to make me feel, how did I not know this? All of that. And it's all right that I have those feelings. I mean, we try to, or at least I try to with my girls in the same way, that there's times that they get so disappointed at not being able to do something, or feeling, I could sense the shame at times with my oldest too, when I say something like, did you put sugar in that? And then she immediately it's like, no, I didn't, but not in like, as if her choice was wrong and I'm shaming her in some way. Like, she just didn't know that you don't put sugar in that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, no, I'm just telling you, like, next time, remember, this one doesn't need that, for whatever reason. And then it's okay to feel like you don't know. It's all right. You're still amazing. You're still pretty awesome, little girl. You just didn't know. Now you know.
Well, and I think it goes back to also, just to bring it full circle to, I think, my favorite thing that you said today. There's so much, but this idea that we need to continue to expand our capacity to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because that is going to help us be courageous. It's going to help us listen harder. It's going to give us the power behind our voice that we need to be heard and to speak up for others whose voices can't be heard.
Mm-hmm.
So, Elsie, thank you for such thought-provoking conversation today, because I know, like, I'm going to need to go back and listen to this again and just really sit with it and, like, let it soak in. Just the wisdom that you have given us, that you have spoken to us today. I just want to honor and acknowledge you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, lovely.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the final question that I ask everyone, and that is, in your life right now, what is your inner voice asking of you?
To keep going.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, to keep going. And so hopefully, it's like, thanks for that. I'm scared. I mean, there's lots of learning. And one of the key things that I teach you guys too, and I think in podcasting, not even in such a deep way, but we get so many questions, from new podcasters that come in that are like, should I make my show an interview show, or does it need to be 30 minutes, or should it be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I want to do yet. Is it going to be a solo show? And it's like, something happens when you do it that's going to start to answer those questions for you.
Yes.
You have to start speaking. And with the E-League stuff, there was an idea. There was and it continues to, again, it's an evolving, living thing. And all I know is that when I take action and when I give voice, something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that is. And I'm willing to go with it and challenge myself to not have all the answers. So it's an experiment.
Yes.
And we all need to try that. And you don't have to have it all figured out.
Love it. Elsie, you're an inspiration. Thank you.
You're welcome, love.
Holy cow, you guys. Can we talk about the truth bombs that were just dropped by Elsie? I'll just read them to you. We must expand our capacity to be uncomfortable. Hello. We must attune to something greater than our lens. Using our voice requires us to listen. Oh, I'm not joking. Like, I'm going to have to go back and listen to this and take notes, because she challenged me. Elsie challenged me in this episode. I think that I come from this perspective of we can all be heard. And I believe that all of us have an important voice and that all of us have a voice that matters. But I'm learning that we all don't have a voice that can be heard. And it's up to those of us who do have a voice that can be heard to speak up and to join together with the voices of the people who aren't being heard. This is serious business, you guys, and we can make an impact. This is another way that we can begin to change our world and change our world for the better. And I know that you guys want that. I feel it. I see it on my Facebook feed. I see it in Instagram. I feel it and hear it when I talk to my friends about the state of our world. I feel it even when I listen to the news, when I watch what's going on around the world, or just even in our country or my state. Our world is yearning for people to stand up and speak truth. And I am so inspired to do that. And I'm so excited to watch all of you do that, because I know that your soul is asking you to speak up. And please, please listen to it, because what you have to say is important. You are worthy.